Greetings, salutations, let's do a reading update. At the end of my last reading update, I was reading The Latinist. I forget if I had finished it or not. But after that, I talked about starting Hamlet, which I did eventually. But first, I read My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. This is a book that I bought multiple years ago at this point, right after I had started getting into the horror thriller genre. I just really loved the cover and the idea of it, which the back reads, "Our love story is simple. I met a gorgeous woman. We fell in love. We had kids. We moved to the suburbs. We told each other our biggest dreams and our darkest secrets. And then we got bored. We look like a normal couple. We are your neighbors, the parents of your kid's friend, the acquaintances you keep meaning to get dinner with. We all have our secrets to keeping a marriage alive. Ours just happens to be getting away with murder."
How to Get Away with Murder.
I mostly listened to this book, and honestly, like, it's a chunker, and I feel like the audiobook went by pretty quickly. In the end, it was okay. I gave it 3 stars, and I'm going to unhaul the physical copy. I feel like there just wasn't enough like nuanced ideas within the text, but it certainly kept my attention and was entertaining, which sometimes is all you need. So that was My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. Then I did get into Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. As I mentioned in the last video, I was using an audiobook to start this again because I've tried to start the beginning of this book 3 or 4 times. Sam absolutely loves it. I love learning about Shakespeare. I love Hamlet. And so it was something that I really, really would like to read, but I just could not get into. So I got the audiobook from Libby and used that to help me get through it. And unfortunately, I just didn't end up liking it that much. Historical fiction is something that is really hard for me to sink my teeth into. I don't know what it is, but I have a really hard time. I don't know. I love a lot of the ideas of this book. I love that they never name Shakespeare by name, which is something that Sam pointed out to me as a way to get me to read it. I'm really looking forward to the film adaptation, but at the end of the day, I think that the historical fiction setting and the way that Maggie O'Farrell writes is just maybe not for me. So I ended up giving this 3 stars at the behest of Sam. And maybe I'll rent a Maggie O'Farrell book from the library in the future, but I don't think I'm gonna like jump straight into buying any of her things in the future. After that, I wanted to get back into my romance nonsense, and I read Ashley Poston's new book, A Novel Love Story. I am learning that I really, really like magical realism. I'm still learning all of the words of the genres and everything that are new to me, but I really like when it's just like magic dropped into a day-to-day basis. Ashley Poston, I think that the way she writes is really interesting and very intelligent. It's not always the way that my brain reads, if that makes sense. I feel like I have a hard time like stepping into the rhythm of how she writes, particularly in this one. Unfortunately, I feel like her main character, Elsie, just wasn't for me, and her narration and her style was hard for me to step into. But I still really liked the basis of this book, which is the idea that a woman accidentally, somehow, magically drives into the town of her favorite book. She gets to meet the main characters of the series that she's loved for forever, and gets to meet new characters that she's never met before, and kind of find out what was supposed to happen at the end of the series that she never got to read. And I really liked that idea. I really liked the plot points of the romance. I thought were really interesting without giving anything away. The 3rd act breakup, which is a staple in most books, is really well used in this one. It's really well deployed, and I felt like it actually made sense and added something to the book. So I would say my favorite part of the book was literally like the end of it. I think she really landed the plane. I just had a hard time stepping into Elsie's character. After that, Sam told me that her and her book club in Savannah were getting ready to read Cult Classic by Sloane Crosley. And this is a book that I have had on my TBR shelf. I bought it like a year and a half ago, I think. And so I used that as an excuse to get into it. And I'm so happy that I did, and also that Sam was reading it immediately after me, because this is one of my favorite books of the year. I think this is going to be number 2 after Piranesi, unless anything else spectacular comes along, which I welcome it if it does. But this was made for me. This is one of those books that the way that Sloane writes, or maybe how her main character thinks, is very on point with how I think about things. And I absolutely loved the basis of the novel. The idea is that our main character slowly keeps running into her exes, and she can't figure out what is going on until she realizes her ex-boss is running a cultish business venture where people with lots and lots of money can pay to gain closure from their exes, and he's using her as the like guinea pig, the test subject, and she doesn't realize that this is happening until a couple of exes in. So then it becomes a story of like making the most of this closure that is being given to her, and also continuing to move into the future with the relationship that she currently has, make wiser choices with that relationship based on the knowledge that she's gaining from this experiment. And I just thought it was so quotable. I love the idea of it. I am very romantic in my ideals of closure and mourning and worshiping ex-relationships, not just in a like a love romantic way, but like in a life romantic philosophical way. And she just had some quotes in here that absolutely sang to me, one of which was, "She was right, I was a people hoarder. Sometimes I would pull up an old exchange and feel myself fall backward as if through a tunnel, coming out the other end with emotions that were meant to be memories. It was like sticking a pebble in a wound, then getting frustrated that the wound wasn't healing faster. It was also falsely communal as I reread these men's words, which weren't theirs anymore, but artifacts of their former selves. It was not healthy to binge episodes of a sitcom starring my ex-boyfriend's cousin, but I did this like I smoked, with an acknowledgement of each instance as poisonous, and yet only the vaguest of acknowledgement that my body was tallying the bill." That particular quote, Sam read and texted me and was like, "Was this one of the quotes you were talking about that hurt you?" Which was rude, but she did. I could keep reading all of the quotes in this book, but I would just suggest picking it up if any of those ideas resonate with you. Highly recommend. 5 stars, second favorite book of the year is my guess. Then I read A Very Nice Girl by Imogen Crimp. This is a book that I was drawn to and picked up because of the title. And I unfortunately felt like it just was the same as so many other books that I have read this year and in the last couple of years, where it's just a book about a girl who is growing up and is in a toxic relationship, usually with an older man like it was in this one, and she can't quite take responsibility for the things that she is choosing to do in her life that are making it turn out the way it is. But unfortunately, this book in particular, I've read multiple this year. This one in particular didn't really feel like it had any new ideas. I read Acts of Desperation, which was very similar this year, and I felt like it was so well written and had so many beautiful quotes and ideas about life that it kind of evened out the fact that I have read that storyline, those plot points before. What else? I read The Latinist, which is a very similar storyline, but it takes place in academia and has a lot to do with her studies and the role that education has in her life, and so that made it different. But this one unfortunately just felt like somebody whining for a long time and not taking responsibility for themselves. And so unfortunately I'm going to unhaul this one, and I believe I gave it 3 stars. It would probably honestly be close to a 2.75. I'll have to think about it a little bit more, but it was okay. Then I read Before We Were Innocent by Ella Berman. I loved this book. I love the way it is printed, and I thought that the title was really interesting in terms of what the actual plot of the book is, which is this idea that 2 friends that haven't seen each other since the passing of their friend when they were teenagers reunite under mysterious circumstances, and you learn through them being back together again that they went to court for the potential murder of their friend that died all those years ago, which then makes you think of the title in a new light. And then it's this continuation of us learning about the past while trying to figure out what's happening in the present and these weird circumstances under which they're together again. And it was okay. I honestly, like, by the end, just like wanted to finish it. I am going to unhaul it. So I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a huge recommendation for anyone. It was supposed to be a thriller, and I didn't feel like it was all that thrilling. It didn't keep my attention very well. It felt like a lot of, I don't know, like teen shows that are on Hulu and stuff right now. So yeah, so this was like a 3-star for me, I think. Then I did myself the disservice of finally listening to Matthew Perry's memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. It has been a year since we found out about Matthew Perry's passing, something that still brings me to tears. And I finally decided, after having owned the audiobook where he reads it well before his passing, that maybe I could finally handle listening to his voice for 8 or 9 hours talking about the things that has happened to him in his life. I have a really hard time talking about it because I really respect the work he has done for people getting sober and that part of his legacy that he's left behind. I obviously, like, Chandler is such a huge part, and Friends in general is such a huge part of my childhood, and I will absolutely always love him. But honestly, if you are a big Chandler, Friends, Matthew Perry fan, I don't know that I would recommend reading or listening to his book. Next, I read Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. As I started to get into certain parts of the fantasy genre, after reading, what was that book called? The Atlas Six, and really liking it, I picked up Ninth House off of like very similar recommendations, and I liked it. I didn't like it as much as I liked the Atlas Six, but there were a lot of really great quotes and ideas. This is very dark academia based, which I loved, and it's also set in Yale, which I find so interesting. I've always been so intrigued by Ivy League schools, and I found all of that super interesting. I'm going to try to read the next book. I've been told by Katie and read some reviews that they didn't like the second book nearly as much as they liked the first book, but I'll at least rent it from the library and try. But I really liked a lot of Bardugo's fresh ideas in this book. So that got us to 44 books so far in the year. I think I'm 2 or 3 ahead of schedule. It's about the end of October, so I still have a little bit of time. I'll put the count on the screen. My Gen Litfic to finish. Again, it wasn't necessarily my goal to get it done before the end of the year, but I'm doing really, really well, and I would really love, since I'm so close, if I could get it done before the end of the year, but I don't think that's gonna happen. I'm so proud of myself for getting through so many this year and continuing to, I haven't fully done a book buying ban this year. I've still bought lots of books, but not nearly as many as I have been, especially not when it comes to books that I end up unhauling because I didn't like them when I finally got to them. I've been making a lot more use of my library and the Libby app, which I absolutely love, and Hoopla, and all of those such wonderful things. Speaking of which, I'm using Libby currently to half listen to and half read The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I know this is a very beloved book, and I had it on my shelf for about a year now, I think. I bought it in Colorado at the Tattered, what is their bookstore called? The Tattered Cover, I think. The Tattered Cover bookstore in Denver, with Katie, who really recommended it to me, and Sam recommended it to me as well. And it was a slow start, but I think I'm about like 60% through now, and I'm just absolutely loving it. It will be, I think, one of my top 10 for sure, if not top 5 favorite books of the year. I love a quotable book. A quotable book is so important to me, and she is so extremely quotable and has a lot of the same of those like romantic sensibilities that I was talking about as I do. And so I really feel like I connect to her characters and just think that the idea of the whole thing is fascinating and is something that we've like known of before, but she kind of takes it in a new direction, and I really appreciate that. The basis of this book is that a young girl makes a deal with a god or a devil or whatever you want to believe he is, that she can be free at all times, that she never finds herself bound to another person. And in the miscommunication in that wish, she lives forever, but no one can ever possibly remember her. She's not allowed to really like make an imprint in the moment on people's lives. They forget her after they don't see her anymore. She's not allowed to keep like physical belongings in the world, and so she got what she wished for, but she's also stuck in this cycle of watching the world go by and not being allowed to make an imprint on it herself. And it's just a very interesting divergence that Schwab takes with this idea, and I'm loving it so far. So thank you to Sam and Katie, who told me to keep reading and promised that I would like it, because I am loving it. So that is a reading update. I'm traveling a lot through the end of the year, so I'm hoping that that doesn't cut down on what I'm able to read. I think I'll for sure get to at least my 50 book goal on Goodreads before the end of the year, but it would be really great, as I talked about, to get more of my TBR done. So we shall see.